How do you handle disagreements or conflicts in your relationship?
Hi everyone, this is Darren at Cryptic Red. Today we'll be talking about a bypass for FortiWeb Cloud. If you're not aware, FortiWeb Cloud is a product that allows you to have as a kind of infrastructure as a service kind of WAF in front of your web application. So in general, when you have a WAF, one of the important things to do is to firewall the web application so that it will only receive traffic from the WAF. In doing that, you're making sure that any web request has to go through the WAF and therefore be subject to any block rules, any logging or anything like that that's implemented on the WAF side. Now, FortiWeb allows you to do this, but the problem is the external IP addresses for FortiWeb systems is kind of all the same for all the users within the same region. So basically what that means is if you set yourself up a FortiWeb WAF, point it at a protected web application, you'll still be coming from the same IP addresses as the legitimate WAF. But for your WAF, you can disable blocking. You can disable logging, so therefore any traffic that's going through your WAF is not subject to the same rules as the traffic that's going through the real WAF. So in this diagram you can see an example of how this might be set up. So we've got the web browser is going to connect through the real WAF. It's going to come out of one of several IP addresses. It's going to be allowed by an AWS security group that has a whitelist set for the IP addresses. And then at the back end we have a target application. In this case, it's literally just going to be an Apache 2 server with a single static text file, and that's going to be enough for this example. On the other hand, we as an attacker are also going to set up a separate WAF, also within FortiWeb, also within AWS, and again in exactly the same region as the target application, so that as far as possible, everything's the same, and what should happen is our WAF, with all the rules disabled, at least from a layer 3 perspective, will look exactly the same to the security groups as the legitimate WAF. Now, to exploit this vulnerability, you're going to need a couple of things. First of all, you're going to have to identify that the target application is actually running a FortiWeb Cloud WAF. That's easy enough as you can just do a DNS lookup of the application, and what you should find is that you see a CNAME record that mentions FortiWeb. The next thing you'll need to know is the origin IP address, and what I mean by that is the IP address for the actual application, not the WAF. There's a few different ways you might be able to get that. You might find it in sort of DNS history records. Maybe as a pen tester, you already know the IP address. Sometimes you can get lucky, and if you put like .origin or -origin after the subdomain of the website, sometimes you can get it like that. You're also going to need an application that doesn't care too much that the host header doesn't match what it's expecting. When we connect to our WAF, the attacker WAF, we're going to be doing it with a different host header than what normally comes through the real WAF. Finally, the last thing we need is that FortiWeb hasn't been told to origin lock the origin IP address. These origin locks are the fix for this attack, but the only way to set one of these up is to raise a support ticket with Fortinet. There's no way to do it through the dashboard or anything like that. It has to be a support ticket. Given that it's not an obvious and easy way to do this through the dashboard, it makes sense to me that the vast majority of applications that have been set up to be protected by FortiWeb Cloud don't have this enabled. So here you can see an example of an application I've protected with a FortiWAF. Here you can see that block mode is on. And if we click this Allow IP List button here, you can see the list of IP addresses that we have to whitelist on our application to allow Fortinet to send us our traffic. And on this tab you can see that we can connect to our application through the WAF. And then we can also try to send a simple SQL injection string to just prove that the WAF is working and getting it to block us. Here in AWS, we've got it set up so that only the IP addresses provided to us by Fortinet are able to come through and hit the web ports. And here you can see those security groups working. If you try and access the web application directly by its IP address, you get no response. From the attacker side, we've also set up a WAF. We've pointed at the same back-end origin IP address, the one we're trying to target. And you can see here under the Allow IP list, this is exactly the same set of IP addresses that was given to the real user. Finally, note that block mode is turned off. This WAF isn't going to block anything. As you can see here, our evil WAF is able to access the same backend, but we're able to use SQL injection strings without getting blocked. So I just wanted to close out the video by showing you the FortiWeb documentation. Here it talks about origin lock. It says that lock your origin IP address to ensure it can only be used by your account. And you can also see here it says the origin server lock setup is only configurable through Fortinet support. You have to raise a ticket. Now I can quite imagine why they've done this. When handing out these origin locks, you need to make sure that this IP address isn't already in use by another WAF. You need to make sure that people are able to abuse this to bring down websites. But in taking this approach, I'm a bit worried that the vast majority of web applications set up to use this WAF aren't going to have this origin lock enabled. For me, a better solution would be that each WAF had its own IP address. That way there would never be this sort of confusion of, did it go through this WAF or that WAF and which set of rules were applied to this particular set of traffic. There wouldn't be any of that kind of confusion, and this attack would then be impossible. That's all for today. If you like this kind of video, please consider subscribing. Thanks.